I still remember the sharp smell of smoke. It was the kind of smell that clings to fabric, to skin, and, somehow, to memory. I had just stepped outside to get a breath of cold December air when I saw the ashes fluttering near the trash bin like dying snowflakes. At first, I didn't understand. But then I recognized the faint shimmer of the red foil envelope I had bought specifically for her, my daughter-in-law, Emily. I felt my chest tighten, not out of anger, but out of a deep, aching disbelief. She had burned my holiday card. I stood there in silence, watching the last bit of the envelope curl inward, consumed by the little flame she thought would erase me. Emily had always found subtle ways to remind me I wasn't welcome, small comments, long sighs, curt answers. But burning my card, that was something new, something darker. And though the night around me was still, my heart beat with a quiet storm building beneath the surface. I bent down and touched one of the remaining pieces of unburned paper. It was still warm. I wondered what she had thought when she opened it. Had she read the message at all? Or had she burned it without even looking? I had written something simple but sincere, something a mother writes when she longs for peace in a family that insists on tension. My handwriting, shaky but earnest, now reduced to soot. It hurt more than I expected. I didn't confront her that night. Oh no, people think age makes you weaker, but they forget that age also sharpens your intuition. Something told me burning my card wasn't just an impulsive act. It was part of something bigger, something she feared might come to light. And I knew that if I waited, if I simply observed, the truth would reveal itself without me having to raise my voice. I've lived long enough to know that secrets have their own gravity. They eventually pull themselves to the surface. So instead of reacting, I quietly gathered the ashes into a small jar I kept in my kitchen. I know it sounds strange, but I've learned that keeping evidence, especially evidence someone thinks is gone, can be powerful. And the moment I closed the lid, a strange certainty washed over me. She thought she had destroyed my message. She had no idea the message would find its way back to her in a form she never expected. I went to bed that night with a heavy heart but a clear mind. I whispered to myself the same phrase my late husband used to say whenever someone tried to undermine us. Let people reveal themselves. Just watch. And watching was exactly what I planned to do. Little did Emily know, the message she tried to burn was only the beginning of something she could no longer control. The next day, I arrived at their house with my usual careful smile, the one I've learned to wear like armor. Emily opened the door with that polite, tight-lipped expression she always used with me. To anyone else, it would look like courtesy. To me, it was a wall. "Hi, Margaret," she said, stepping aside as if she were letting a delivery in, not her husband's mother. I walked past her, my cane tapping softly against the hardwood floor, and I felt her eyes on my back, weighing every move I made. My son, Daniel, appeared from the kitchen with flour on his hands and a distracted smile. "Hey, Mom," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. His embrace was quick, almost rushed, as if he were afraid Emily might catch him being too affectionate. Once upon a time, he would scoop me up, call me Mama, and spin me around the kitchen. Now, he barely met my eyes for more than a second. It wasn't his fault, not entirely. When someone lives in constant emotional tension, they start shrinking themselves just to keep the peace. The dining table was already set, elegant and cold, like a picture torn from a magazine. Perfect plates, folded napkins, those expensive candles Emily loved to show off. But there was something missing, something only a mother would notice. No place card with my name on it. There were tiny handwritten name cards for Daniel, Emily, and even for their little daughter, Lily. Where mine should have been, there was just a blank space, as if I were supposed to sit invisibly wherever I didn't disturb the arrangement. I quietly took a seat at the far end of the table without saying a word. I've learned that silence makes some people more nervous than confrontation. As I settled in, I watched Emily move around the table with rehearsed grace, adjusting forks and straightening glasses. She didn't look at me, not even once. Her body language said everything her mouth didn't. You're here, but you're not welcome. You exist, but you don't belong. It's a special kind of cruelty, pretending someone is there and invisible at the same time. While we waited for the roasted vegetables to finish, I glanced toward the fireplace mantel. There, lined up like a competition I hadn't been invited to, were holiday cards from friends, coworkers, neighbors. Vibrant envelopes, glittering snowmen, scripted wishes of Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. And right in the center, where my card should have been, there was a noticeable gap. The kind of gap you only see when something has been removed. It stung, but it also reminded me she hadn't just burned a card. She had burned a place that was meant for me in this family. Daniel sat down with a sigh, rubbing his temples. Long week? I asked gently. He nodded, but his eyes flicked quickly to Emily, like he was checking if it was safe to answer. Yeah, just a lot going on, he murmured. That was his favorite phrase lately. A lot going on. It meant I'm under pressure, Mom. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to make things worse. I sipped my water, feeling the weight of the unspoken words piling up like snow on a weak roof, waiting for the moment everything would finally collapse. As we began to eat, the conversation stayed on the surface. Work, weather, school plays. But underneath, I felt it. The tension, the fear, the guarded glances. Emily laughed a little too loudly at nothing. Daniel kept checking his phone, as if he were waiting for news. And all the while, I sat there with a secret of my own, the ashes of that burned card, quietly resting in a small glass jar in my kitchen. She thought she had destroyed my message. What she didn't know was that the real message wasn't on paper. It was already written into what was about to unfold, and the truth has a way of demanding to be heard. After dinner, Emily collected the plates one by one, stacking them with the precision of someone trying far too hard to look composed. Daniel excused himself to put Lily to bed, leaving the two of us in an awkward, echoing silence. The faint clatter of dishes filled the room, but beneath it I sensed something else, an uneasiness, a restlessness in Emily that hadn't been there before. She moved quickly, sharply, as if afraid of being cornered by her own thoughts. I stayed seated, my hands folded neatly in my lap, watching her with a calm patience that only age can teach. She avoided meeting my eyes at all costs. Every few seconds, she glanced toward the hallway where Daniel had disappeared, like she was timing her reactions with his footsteps. Anyone watching from the outside might think she simply disliked me, but I knew better. Dislike doesn't make your hands tremble. Dislike doesn't make you swallow hard every time the word truth is mentioned within earshot. When she turned toward the sink, I heard the faint rustle of paper coming from her back pocket. That tiny sound, barely audible, sent a quiet jolt through me. She froze for a second, then continued washing dishes as if nothing had happened, but I saw the stiffness in her shoulders. Whatever that paper was, she didn't want me to notice it. People hide more in what they don't say than in what they do. And Emily was practically screaming in silence. Eventually, I stood up, my cane tapping softly against the wooden floor, and walked toward the hallway. As I passed the kitchen doorway, I heard it. 2 words whispered under her breath, barely a breath themselves. Not yet. I stopped, pretending to adjust the scarf around my neck, giving myself a moment to listen. She muttered again, quieter this time. Not yet, not tonight. Her voice trembled like someone standing on the edge of a decision that terrified them. I turned slightly, just enough to catch her expression without revealing that I was watching. Her face was pale, her eyes darting toward the closed door where Daniel was tucking in their daughter. She kept touching that folded paper in her pocket, like it was burning a hole through the fabric. That was when I realized, whatever she had planned, whatever she was hiding, it involved my son. And it was something she didn't want him, or me, to discover. As I moved down the hallway, I caught a glimpse of something odd on the small table near the stairs, another holiday card envelope. This one wasn't burned. It was sealed, addressed in handwriting I didn't recognize. But the sender's name, scrawled in shaky letters, made my breath hitch. It wasn't from a neighbor or a coworker. It was from someone Emily desperately wanted to keep out of sight. I reached out slowly, brushing my fingers across the envelope without picking it up. The moment I touched it, footsteps echoed behind me. Emily's voice sliced through the hallway, artificially cheerful.
Oh,
That's just an old card. Meant to throw it away. Her tone was too quick, too defensive. She practically snatched the envelope with shaking hands, holding it behind her back like a guilty child. I didn't press her, not yet. Instead, I offered her a gentle smile, the kind that unsettles people who expect hostility. Some messages, I whispered, find their way to the right person whether we want them to or not. Her face drained of color. She knew exactly what I was talking about, even if she didn't understand how much I truly knew. As she turned away, I saw her clutching that hidden paper tighter, breathing faster. Something was unraveling inside her, and she could feel it. She thought she had erased me by burning my card. But the real message, the one she feared most, was already circling back toward her. And Emily had no idea how close it was to landing directly at her feet. Emily kept that folded paper close to her side the rest of the night, holding onto it like a lifeline. Every time she moved, I heard a faint crinkle, just enough to remind me it was still there, haunting her, tightening around her like a quiet threat. I pretended not to notice, though my eyes never truly left her. I've learned over the years that people expose themselves not when you question them, but when you let them squirm under the weight of their own secrets. While she wiped the counters with unnecessary force, Daniel came back downstairs, still rubbing his temples. He looked exhausted, drained in that way only emotional pressure can cause. "Mom," he said softly, "do you want some tea?" Before I could answer, Emily cut in sharply, "She's fine, Daniel. She should probably get going soon anyway." Her voice quivered on the last word. That tremble wasn't anger, it was fear trying to disguise itself as control. Daniel frowned. "Emily, it's barely 8. She didn't respond. Instead, she touched the paper in her pocket again, as if reassuring herself. That small gesture told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't worried about me staying late. She was terrified of what might happen if I didn't leave. Which meant that whatever was written on that paper, it wasn't meant for my eyes or his. I decided to play along. "Actually," I said gently, "tea sounds lovely." Emily's jaw tightened. She looked at Daniel with silent fury, then forced a smile so brittle I thought it might crack. As he boiled water, she paced lightly around the kitchen, pretending to tidy things that were already spotless. Her pacing wasn't about cleanliness, it was about stalling.
she didn't want to sit.
She didn't want to talk. She didn't want to risk that paper slipping out of her pocket. When Daniel stepped out to check on the kettle, I made my move, subtle, quiet, disguised as an old woman simply stretching her arms. But what I really wanted was to test her reaction. I reached toward the fruit bowl on the counter, just near enough to her side that she thought I might touch her. Instantly, her hand flew to her pocket, pressing the hidden paper against her leg. Her eyes flared with panic. She took a step backward like I'd reached for a weapon instead of an apple. "It's just fruit, dear," I said, letting my voice soften, nearly fragile. No need to jump. But inside, my mind sharpened like a blade. That paper was not something trivial. It was something threatening enough to make her guard it with reflexes she didn't know she had. Something she desperately needed to keep Daniel from seeing. And perhaps something she feared I already suspected. A moment later, Daniel returned with the tea tray. Emily rushed to sit down, placing herself at an angle where the pocket was protected by the back of the chair. Her foot tapped uncontrollably under the table. That tapping told me the truth. She was unraveling. The harder she tried to contain her secret, the more it slipped through the cracks in her composure. One wrong move, one unlucky shift, and that paper would fall into plain view. As I took my cup with steady hands, I looked directly into her eyes, not accusing, not angry, just knowing. "You seem awfully tense tonight," I murmured. Emily froze, swallowing hard. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice raw. "Just tired." But I wasn't fooled. She was tired, yes, but not from the day. From the weight of something she didn't want the world, or my son, to discover. And as I sipped my tea, I realized something with chilling clarity. The message she tried to silence when she burned my card wasn't the only message haunting her. There was another. And whatever was written on that folded paper was about to return to her in a way she could no longer control. The tea hadn't even cooled when I noticed Emily's leg bouncing under the table, her fingers gripping the cup so tightly I thought it might shatter. Daniel, oblivious to the storm gathering between us, stirred his tea slowly, eyes distant. "Mom," he said faintly, "I'm sorry dinner was quiet." Before I could respond, Emily's heel struck his shin under the table. He flinched. She didn't even look at him, just sipped her tea like nothing happened. That silent kick was a warning. Don't open your mouth. Don't let her in. But Daniel wasn't the only one receiving messages tonight. When he stepped away to answer a phone call, work, judging by the exasperated sigh, Emily finally exhaled, shoulders buckling like she'd been holding her breath since I arrived. She ran a hand down her face and whispered to herself, "Not now, please, not now." It wasn't a plea to me. It wasn't fear of being caught. It was fear of something larger, something already slipping out of her control. I leaned slightly forward, pretending to adjust my shawl, and that's when I heard it, the faintest vibration. A phone. Not Daniel's. Not mine. Emily's pocket lit up, right where she kept the folded paper. She jolted like someone had slapped her. Snatching the phone, she muttered, "No, stop calling me." But she didn't decline the call. She let it ring, staring at the name on the screen with pure dread. In that reflection on her glasses, I caught a glimpse of the contact name. Clara R. Not a friend. Not a coworker. Someone whose name made her lip tremble. She glanced toward Daniel, still talking by the stairs, then answered the call in a whisper so thin it barely existed. "I told you not to contact me today," she hissed. "No, I can't talk. He's here. She's here." Her eyes flicked toward me, but instead of looking away, I held her gaze, calm and unwavering. Her voice cracked. "Please, Clara, please don't send anything else. I'm handling it." "Handling what?" Clara's muffled voice spilled through the speaker. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. Emily flinched, eyes wide. "No," she whispered sharply. "You promised me you burned it. You said no copies." A tremor went through her body. "If Daniel sees that, my marriage, my life, everything," she cut herself off as soon as she saw me carefully place my cup back on the saucer. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just watched her come apart in silence. When she ended the call, she pressed the phone to her forehead, her breath trembling. "This can't be happening," she muttered. "Not now, not because of her." The way she said her, acidic, shaking, made it clear she wasn't talking about Clara.
She was talking about me.
She looked up suddenly, eyes sharp with panic. "What did you hear?" she snapped, her voice cracking on the last word. I let a slow, gentle smile lift the corners of my mouth. "More than you think," I whispered, "but less than what you fear." Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. She gripped the edge of the table like she needed it to stay upright. "This isn't you don't understand." "Oh, Emily," I said softly, "I understand more than you imagine." Because now I knew. The paper in her pocket wasn't just a secret. It was leverage. It was evidence. It was a message from someone she never wanted in this house. And she was terrified that message was about to return, louder, clearer, and impossible to burn. Daniel returned just as Emily shoved her phone back into her pocket, her breathing shallow and uneven. He didn't notice her trembling. He rarely noticed anymore. Stress had trained him to overlook every signal except the loudest ones. "Everything okay?" he asked, glancing between us. Emily forced a brittle smile, one that quivered at the edges. "Perfect," she lied, her voice thin as glass. Daniel accepted it without hesitation, painfully predictably. When he sat beside her, she angled her body away from me, shielding her pocket like a knight defending its last treasure. I watched the subtle movements, the way her hand hovered protectively over the folded paper, the way her fingers twitched whenever Daniel leaned too close. Whatever was written there, it wasn't just damaging. It was explosive. The kind of truth that destroys reputations, marriages, illusions. The kind of truth that returns no matter how many times it's set on fire. Daniel tried to resume normal conversation, asking about my week, about my winter garden, about little things he knew I loved. But Emily couldn't sit still. Every few seconds she glanced toward the hallway, the windows, the stairs, as if expecting someone, anyone, to burst through with a copy of whatever Clara had threatened to send. A guilty conscience is a loud companion. Hers was screaming louder than their ticking wall clock. Finally, I leaned back, letting my voice slice softly through the tension. "You know, Emily," I murmured, "you remind me of someone." She stiffened. Someone who once tried very hard to hide a truth, until the truth revealed her instead. Daniel looked confused, glancing between us. "Mom, what's this about?" he asked. Before I could respond, Emily snapped. "Nothing. She's just being dramatic." I tilted my head, my eyes settling on her with calm precision. "Tell me, dear," I whispered. "How long have you known Clara Rodriguez?" The moment her name left my lips, Emily's face drained of every drop of color. Her hand jerked toward her pocket. Daniel blinked, startled. "Who's Clara Rodriguez?" he asked, but Emily didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mouth opened and closed without a sound. Her breathing accelerated, shallow, sharp, panicked. She looked cornered, hunted, like someone whose escape route had vanished in a puff of smoke. Margaret," she stuttered. "Please don't." She caught herself, biting her lip so hard I saw the blood rise. Daniel's confusion deepened into concern. "Emily? What's going on?" She shook her head violently, as if trying to physically shake the truth away. "Don't," she whispered to me, her voice breaking into something almost childlike. Not angry, not defensive, just terrified. And in that moment, I realized something. Clara wasn't just a secret contact. Clara was the key, the missing piece, the source of whatever Emily had been trying to bury, just like she had burned my holiday card. I leaned in slightly, my voice low, steady, and devastatingly gentle. "You didn't think I'd recognize her handwriting, did you?" Emily's eyes flooded with shock so raw it bordered on horror. She trembled violently now, the folded paper practically burning through her pocket. Daniel turned toward her, his voice barely a whisper. "Emily, what is she talking about?" She didn't answer. She couldn't, because the message she tried to hide, the one she thought was safely destroyed, was already rising from the ashes. And just like smoke, it was curling its way into every room of the house, ready to choke out the lies she had built her comfort on. Emily closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. The truth was coming, whether she wanted it or not. Daniel stared at Emily, waiting, hoping for some sort of explanation. But her eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal searching for an exit. For the first time that night, she wasn't cold, or dismissive, or condescending. She was frightened. And fear, real fear, can't be disguised with posture or polite smiles. It leaks through the cracks of a person's voice, through the trembling of their hands. Emily was unraveling in front of us, thread by trembling thread. "I don't know what she's talking about," Emily whispered hoarsely, wiping her cheek with a quick, shaky hand. "She's trying to stir up drama." But her voice betrayed her, thin, trembling, unconvincing. Daniel frowned. Mom wouldn't make something up like this. What's going on?" The more he pressed, the more panicked she became. She touched her pocket again, clutching the folded paper so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Stop asking me," she snapped suddenly. The outburst startled even her. She gasped afterward, as if shocked by her own voice. Daniel pulled his hand back, stunned. I remained calm, watching, not with judgment, but with an old woman's knowing softness. Sometimes the truth needs only quiet observation to expose itself. Emily wasn't fighting me. She was fighting the collapse of the story she had built. "You said Clara's name," Daniel murmured, his voice now barely above a whisper. "You acted like you knew her." He searched his memories, trying to piece together someone who clearly had never belonged in their home. "Who is she, Emily?" Silence fell between them, heavy, suffocating. Emily lowered her head, her hair falling forward like a curtain trying to hide her expression. "She's no one," she muttered. But the crack in her voice told a different story. I let the silence stretch until she squirmed. Then, gently, I spoke. Clara Rodriguez used to work at the clinic where Daniel did his physical therapy years ago. Emily's head jerked up, eyes wide, horrified. Daniel's brow furrowed. The clinic? But that was before you married her. I finished softly. Emily swallowed hard, her pulse visibly fluttering at her neck. She didn't deny it this time. She didn't have the strength. Emily, Daniel said slowly, why would someone from my past, someone you've never mentioned, call you tonight? That question landed like a stone in her chest. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, caught between lies and truth, between self-preservation and collapse. I didn't want to bring it up, she whispered finally. It wasn't relevant. Daniel leaned forward. Relevant to what? Her eyes filled again, fear, regret, frustration all swirling inside them. To us, she said. To our marriage. Her fingers dug into her thigh as she choked out the words. I didn't want you to know. I folded my hands gently in my lap, my voice soft as winter snow. Secrets don't disappear, dear. They don't burn. They linger until someone breathes on the ashes. Emily's breath caught. She pressed her palm over her mouth, her composure folding in on itself. Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. What did Clara send you, Emily? Her body trembled. She reached slowly, reluctantly, into her pocket. The sound of that crinkling paper seemed to echo through the entire room. When she finally pulled it out, her hand shook so violently she almost dropped it. She held it tightly, staring at it as if it were a live wire. And then she whispered, barely audible, It's about you, Daniel. Daniel's eyes widened, confusion knitting his brow as Emily stared at the folded paper trembling in her hand. The room felt smaller, like the walls were inching closer, sealing us into a moment she had spent months, maybe years, trying to avoid. About me, he repeated softly, as if the words themselves were too fragile to touch. Emily nodded, her throat tight, her lips trembling. But she didn't unfold the paper. She couldn't. It was as though whatever truth it held might scorch her fingers if she tried. She pressed it flat against the table, keeping her palm over it like she feared the truth might escape. It wasn't supposed to exist anymore, she whispered. Clara promised me she destroyed everything. Her voice shook with the kind of fear that comes from knowing the past has claws sharp enough to tear through the present. Daniel tried to reach for the paper, but she snatched it back instinctively, protectively, almost desperately. Don't, she pleaded. Please don't look at it yet. He stared at her, wounded. Emily, whatever it is, I deserve to know. But she shook her head, tears pooling in her eyes. Not like this. Not in front of your mother. Her voice cracked on the last word, as if I were a threat simply by being present. But I knew better.
She didn't fear me.
She feared what he'd become once he learned the truth she'd been hiding. Silence settled over the room, dense, suffocating. Then I spoke, gently but firmly. Secrets thrive in darkness, Emily. But you've kept this one in the dark so long it's poisoning everything around you. She inhaled sharply, as if my words cut her deeper than any accusation could. Her grip on the paper tightened until I worried she might tear it just to avoid showing it. Daniel reached out again, slower this time, softer. Emily, look at me. She hesitated, then raised her red, watery eyes. Whatever this is, we'll deal with it. But not if you keep hiding. His voice, gentle and steady, broke something inside her. She let out a weak sob as her shoulders collapsed inward. I was trying to protect you, she choked. Protect us. Protect me from what? He whispered. Her gaze fell to the paper again. Her voice barely rose above breath. From the truth about the accident. My heart jolted. Daniel went still. The accident. The one that nearly ended his life. The one that left him with months of therapy. The one none of us fully understood. It wasn't your fault, Daniel, she said quickly, urgently. You always blamed yourself, but you shouldn't have. She covered her mouth, voice trembling. It wasn't an accident. Someone did it. The room froze. Daniel's face drained of color. What are you talking about? Emily's trembling fingers slowly unfolded the paper, revealing crumpled edges, ink smudged with old fingerprints. She slid it across the table, but stopped halfway, as if crossing that last inch would change everything. "This," she whispered, "is the message Clara tried to burn. The one she thought was gone." Daniel reached for it with shaking hands. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. The message Emily tried to hide, the message she thought she could destroy, the message she feared would return, was finally here. And whatever truth it carried was about to explode through our lives like a winter storm tearing open the sky. Daniel unfolded the paper with slow, trembling hands, as though he were unwrapping something fragile, something that could break him if he moved too quickly. The room fell into a silence, so deep I could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock, each second slicing through the air like a blade. Emily watched him with wide, terrified eyes, gripping the edge of her chair as if bracing for impact. His gaze moved across the page, line by line. With each sentence, his breath grew shallower. His knuckles whitened. His lips parted slightly, stunned. When he finally looked up, his face was pale, drained of warmth. This isn't real," he whispered. "This can't be real." But the truth is a stubborn guest. It arrives whether we're prepared to receive it or not. Emily reached out to him, but he flinched away, a small movement, almost imperceptible, yet devastating. She withdrew her hand slowly, her expression collapsing into helplessness. "I didn't want you to see it like this," she said softly. "I was going to tell you, eventually." Her voice broke on the last word. Eventually. The most dangerous promise people make. I watched Daniel's eyes return to the paper, scanning it again, as if hoping the words might rearrange into something less horrifying. "Clara wrote this?" he asked, barely audible. Emily nodded, wiping tears from her trembling chin. "Yes. She was working that night. She saw everything." Her voice quivered. "She saw who cut the brake line." The words hit the air like a gunshot. The brake line. Daniel's accident wasn't an accident. My throat tightened, and I felt a coldness crawl up my spine. I had suspected many things over the years, but never something so deliberate, so calculated. Daniel shook his head violently, as if trying to shake off the truth. No. Why would anyone do that? Why would Clara wait all this time to say something? Emily's voice cracked. She didn't wait. She told me months ago. She came to me first because she thought. Her breath stuttered. She thought I already knew. Daniel stared at her, stunned. Knew what? Emily's eyes flooded with a fresh wave of tears. Knew who did it. A silence heavier than grief settled over the room. My heart pounded in my chest as an old, painful memory surfaced. An argument, years ago, harsh words, threats whispered behind closed doors. But the thought fled before it fully formed. Daniel leaned back, clutching the paper like it was evidence in a trial he never asked to be part of. "Then who?" he demanded, voice raw. Emily squeezed her eyes shut. "It was someone who wanted you out of the way, someone who thought you were a problem." The word problem hung in the air like a curse. "I didn't believe Clara at first," Emily continued, her voice quivering uncontrollably. "But she had proof. And she wanted me to convince you to file a report." She covered her mouth with her hand. "But I was scared. I didn't want to tear our family apart." Daniel's breath hitched. His grip tightened on the chair. "Emily, who did this to me?" She looked at me. Not a glance. Not a flinch. A look full of guilt, fear, and something else, something that twisted deep inside my chest. And in that moment I understood. She wasn't afraid of what the paper said. She was afraid of what the paper implied. And afraid that I, of all people, already knew the answer she had tried so hard to bury. Emily's gaze lingered on me, long enough, heavy enough, for Daniel to notice. He turned sharply in his chair, confusion tightening into suspicion. "Why are you looking at my mother like that?" he demanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. Emily jerked her eyes away, wiping her face quickly, but it was too late. A truth unspoken is still loud enough to be heard. "I'm not," she whispered, shaking her head. But her voice trailed off. Her hands fidgeted. Her breathing stuttered. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes narrowing with the instinct of someone connecting dots he didn't know existed. Emily, tell me why you looked at her like that. She swallowed hard. Her fingers dug into her palms, leaving small crescents of tension in her skin. Because Clara, she said something. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Something about the night before the accident. Cold prickles crawled up the back of my neck. Daniel's gaze shot toward me, quick, searching, almost pleading. Mom, do you know anything about this? The hurt in his eyes struck me like a knife. I raised my chin, firm but calm. Of course not. I would never. But Emily cut me off, her voice cracking. She wasn't talking about sabotage, she blurted. Clara said your mother warned you. The night before. Warned him? Daniel's eyebrows knit together. Warn me about what? Emily looked down at her lap, breathing in short, uneven bursts. She said your mother came to the clinic earlier that week. She said she seemed upset. Her eyes flicked toward me again, full of something fragile and confused. She said she overheard your mother telling someone that you were being watched. Daniel turned to me again, searching my face for truth. For answers. Mom, did you say anything like that? I inhaled slowly, remembering that week with a clarity that chilled me. I did go to the clinic, I admitted softly. You were exhausted from therapy. I wanted to speak with the staff about adjusting your schedule, giving you more rest. Daniel nodded. He remembered that part. But Emily's voice cut through my memory like a shard of ice. And the part about being watched? I hesitated. Not because I was hiding something, but because the memory was blurred by grief, exhaustion, and fear. I said someone was pressuring him. I whispered. That he was being pushed too hard. I never said he was being watched. Emily pressed her lips together, a tear slipping unbidden down her cheek. But Clara said she heard you mention a name. Daniel's heartbeat was visible in his throat. What name? Emily hesitated. She looked at the paper. Then she looked at me, and she whispered, Your brother. The room froze. My breath caught. Daniel stared at me like the ground beneath him had split open. Uncle Robert, he whispered. Why would Mom talk about him? A cold, old ache pressed into my chest. Daniel, you know your uncle struggled. He had debts, dangerous acquaintances. I was worried he might try to pull you into something. My voice trembled, despite my efforts to study it. But that doesn't mean. Emily interrupted, her voice trembling. Clara said he came to the clinic. She saw him talking to you in the hallway. And the next day your brakes failed. Daniel leaned back, stunned, hands trembling. Mom, is this true? I closed my eyes. The memory rushed back with brutal clarity. My brother at the clinic entrance, pacing, agitated, desperate. He stopped me, asked for money, warned me that Daniel's car wasn't safe. I thought it was nonsense. Another attempt to scare me into helping him. I didn't think he meant it literally, I whispered. Daniel's face crumpled with shock. Emily pressed the paper closer to her heart. Clara wrote that she saw him leaving the parking lot, right near her car. The words struck the room like thunder. Daniel looked at me, his voice breaking. Mom, did you know he was there that day? Tears stung my eyes. Yes. But I never imagined, never believed, he would do something so horrible. Emily covered her face with shaking hands. Clara said she wrote everything down, every detail, because she didn't trust that the truth would stay buried. Daniel's breath trembled. The truth wasn't just a message returning to Emily. It was a message returning to all of us. Heavy, damaging, unavoidable. And my brother's shadow, long buried, had just stepped into the room with us. The room felt colder the moment his name settled in the air. Robert. A name that carried years of tension, shame, and unresolved wounds. Daniel looked at me as if trying to read truths I had hidden between the wrinkles of my face. But I had never hidden anything from him. Not intentionally. Secrets, however, have a cruel way of planting themselves in the spaces we overlook. I didn't know he was there to hurt you, I whispered, my voice trembling with old guilt. I swear on your father's grave. Daniel looked away, rubbing his hands over his face, as though trying to warm himself from the chill that had seeped into the room. Emily watched him anxiously, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles had turned the color of bone. What did he say to you? Daniel asked faintly. I took a slow, shaky breath. The memory surfaced reluctantly, like a wounded animal creeping out from the dark. He told me he needed money again. Said he was in trouble, that people were after him. He said you were too close to something you shouldn't be. My voice grew quieter. I thought it was nonsense. He was paranoid, unstable. I had no reason to believe he meant anything real. Daniel swallowed hard, processing every word. And the thing about my car, he whispered. I closed my eyes for a moment. He said your brakes were bad news, that you shouldn't drive the next day. My voice cracked. But he'd said things like that before, dramatic warnings, exaggerated threats. I didn't want to scare you again. I didn't want to feed into his delusions. Daniel stared at me, shocked. So you said nothing? I meant to tell you, I said softly. But you were tired that night. And the next morning you left early. I thought it was just Robert trying to manipulate me again. My hands trembled in my lap. I didn't know, Daniel. I didn't know. Emily suddenly stood from her chair, pacing anxiously. Clara wasn't sure if your mother believed him or not, she said, voice thin and wavering. She only knew she overheard him mention your car. That's why she wrote it down. She thought if anything ever happened, someone should know. Daniel pressed his palms to his forehead, breathing heavily. The truth was a storm breaking over him. Loud, violent, disorienting. So you think Uncle Robert, my own uncle, cut my brake line? Emily glanced at the letter, then at me. That's what Clara believed. She said he had tools with him. She said he walked out toward the parking lot after talking to you. Tears filled her eyes again. She didn't want to believe it either, but she said his behavior was unmistakably suspicious. Daniel's face tightened in pain. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? He asked Emily, his voice cracking. I didn't know how, she whispered. I didn't want to tear your family apart. I didn't want to be the one who pointed fingers. She paused, shaking her head. And honestly, I was scared. Scared your mother would hate me. Scared you wouldn't believe me. Scared your uncle would come after us. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time that night. Behind all the hostility, the bitterness, the coldness, there was fear. A fear she had carried alone. Daniel rose slowly from his chair, every movement heavy. Mom, do you think he could have done it? Truly. His voice broke. I wanted to give him comfort. I wanted to protect him. But I could not lie.
Not now.
Not after everything. I don't know, I whispered. But I know he was desperate. And desperate men do dangerous things. The truth hung over us like a storm cloud ready to burst. Then Emily sank back into her chair, staring at the floor, and murmured, There's more. Daniel stiffened. I froze. Emily swallowed hard. Clara said that wasn't the only message. The room fell so silent I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the next room. She said, There's a second letter. My heart stopped. And she's sending it, Emily whispered. Tonight. The message Emily tried to burn was only the beginning. Emily's words landed with the weight of an avalanche. Daniel froze mid-breath, and I felt my heart tighten the way it used to when I heard bad news on the telephone, slowly at first, then all at once, until breathing felt like a chore. A second letter, a second truth, a second blow waiting to fall. Emily's eyes darted anxiously toward the window as if expecting headlights to appear, carrying the next strike of fate. Daniel sank back into his chair, shaken. She's sending another one? His voice trembled with a mix of disbelief and dread. Emily nodded, clasping her hands together so tightly her wedding ring dug into her skin. She said it explains everything she didn't have courage to say in the first letter. She said it's the part that scares her the most. Her voice cracked. She said this time, she included names. Daniel blinked. What meeting? Robert's face tightened with guilt. The job offer. The one from those investors. He took a shuddering breath. They wanted you to sign a contract. A bad one. Dangerous people, Danny. I owed the money. They said if you signed with them, my debt would be cleared. But if you refused, they'd come after me. His voice broke. I couldn't let you get involved. So, I tried to keep you home. Daniel stared at him, speechless. Emily covered her mouth. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. Robert wiped his nose with his sleeve, shaking. I messed up. I panicked. And when the accident happened, I ran. I didn't mean for any of it. Silence filled the room, thick, suffocating. Daniel's jaw tightened. Why didn't you turn yourself in? Robert's voice shrank to a whisper. Because I was scared of losing you all. Scared of prison. Scared of everything. He looked at me, eyes pleading. I'm sorry, Margaret. I swear I'm sorry. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, Emily whispered something that chilled the air. Clara said the second letter wasn't about the breaks. Robert's head snapped toward her. His eyes widened in terror. And in that instant I understood. The worst part of Clara's message was still coming. Not about the accident. Not about my brother. But something else. Something darker. Something meant for Daniel's ears alone. Robert staggered a step backward, gripping the doorframe like the ground beneath him had vanished. His reaction wasn't the guilt of a man who'd already confessed. It was fear. Pure, bone-deep fear. The kind a person feels only when a truth much bigger, much darker, threatens to surface. Emily, trembling, pressed herself against the wall, as though distance could shield her from what was coming. Daniel sensed it too. What do you mean? He asked slowly. The second letter isn't about the breaks. His voice sharpened. Then what is it about? Emily didn't answer. She couldn't. She looked at Robert the way someone looks at a loaded gun, knowing it might go off any second. Robert shut his eyes, shaking his head. She wouldn't. She promised me she'd stay out of it. But even as he said it, the truth twisted across his face. He knew Clara hadn't stayed out of anything. Daniel stepped forward, anger boiling under his skin. Out of what, Uncle Robert? What else is she trying to tell us? Robert swallowed hard, his throat working like he was trying to choke down a confession. Danny, listen. He held out a trembling hand. Not everything Clara says is. Tell me. Daniel cut in sharply. His voice had changed, no longer the wounded son or confused husband, but a man who sensed that his life as he knew it was about to split open. Robert hesitated, and in that hesitation, I realized the second letter wasn't about a crime. It was about lineage,
History.
family, and whatever Clara wrote, it wasn't meant to expose my brother. It was meant to expose someone else. Emily began to cry softly. Daniel, please sit down. Her voice buckled under the weight of something she had tried desperately to hide, something she never wanted to speak aloud. You're going to need to sit. Daniel stared at her, chest rising and falling. Why? Emily covered her mouth, her eyes full of sorrow. Because the second letter, it's about you. And your past. My past, Daniel repeated. Robert's shoulders sagged. His face crumpled. I felt my stomach twist painfully. Emily nodded. Clara said she didn't think you ever knew. Her voice cracked. And she said it wasn't her secret to tell. But since I didn't say anything, she felt she had to. Daniel's face went ashy. Didn't say anything? About what? Emily sobbed harder. About who was at the clinic, not just her uncle. Robert rubbed his temples frantically. Clara misunderstood. She wasn't supposed to, no one should have seen. Emily shut her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. Daniel, please don't hate me. Hate you for what? He snapped. Emily pressed a hand to her stomach, as though physically bracing for impact. Because Clara said the second letter includes a confession. Robert went still. Daniel took a step back. What confession? Emily's lips trembled uncontrollably. She forced herself to look at him, her husband, before speaking the words that made my legs go weak beneath me. She said your father wasn't the only man in that clinic hallway the night before your accident. Daniel blinked. What are you talking about? My dad died years before that. Emily nodded, trembling. I know. But Daniel, someone else was there. Someone Clara recognized. Robert closed his eyes, anguish twisting his face. Daniel's voice dropped. Who? Emily sobbed into her hands before whispering, Your biological father. My cane slipped slightly, and I gripped it hard to stay upright. Daniel went rigid, his breath trapped inside his chest. What did you just say? He whispered, voice breaking. Emily cried harder. Clara said the second letter explains everything. The truth about your birth. The truth your mother never told you. He turned to me slowly, eyes wide, hurt, confused, pleading without words. Mom, what is she talking about? My heart cracked open. There it was, the message that had returned from the ashes. The secret I had spent decades protecting. The truth I never wanted to hurt him. A truth no fire could destroy. Daniel stared at me as if the world beneath his feet had split open. His eyes, usually soft, steady, familiar, were now wide and trembling, desperate for an answer I wasn't ready to give. I felt the weight of decades pressing down on my chest. Secrets age like ghosts. They never grow weaker. They cling tighter. And now one of mine had clawed its way back into the light. Mom, he whispered, voice cracking. Is it true? The room seemed to shrink around us. Emily sobbed quietly against the wall, and Robert stood frozen in the doorway, guilt carved into every line of his face. But Daniel saw none of it. His entire world had narrowed to me, waiting for the truth I had spent half my life running from. I lowered myself slowly into a chair, my cane trembling in my grip. Daniel, I began softly, you must understand something. I never lied to hurt you. I never wanted you to grow up with pain. Tears stung my eyes. Everything I did out of love. But love, when tangled with fear, can turn into a prison. And I had trapped myself inside it long ago. Daniel stepped closer, his voice shaking. Tell me the truth. All of it. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, my heart beating too loudly. I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd watched build a life, and I felt the old ache of a wound I'd sewn shut with trembling hands. Your father, the man who raised you, loved you more than anything, I said gently. He was proud of you from the moment he held you in his arms. My voice cracked. But biologically, no. He was not the man who conceived you. Daniel staggered back, as if struck. He pressed a hand to his chest, breath faltering. Why didn't you ever tell me? He whispered. Because I didn't want you growing up ashamed of something that was never your fault, I said. Because you were innocent. Because you deserved a clean childhood, not one marked by someone else's mistakes. Emily wiped her tears. Clara said she recognized the man, she murmured. She said she saw him arguing with someone near the clinic that night. Robert rubbed his face, groaning. I told you Clara saw too much, he muttered. I warned her to stay quiet, but the damage was already done. Daniel turned to me again, voice hollow. Who is he? My biological father. Who is he? My heart squeezed painfully. A man I knew before I met your father. Someone from my past I thought I'd never see again. I brushed a tear from my cheek. We were young. It was complicated. I never meant to hide this from you forever. But you did, Daniel whispered. I nodded. I did. Because when your real father learned about you, he didn't want anything to do with us. And when your true father came back years later, after your father died, I sent him away. My voice faltered. I didn't want him disrupting your life. I didn't want his instability, his temper, his chaos anywhere near you. Daniel swallowed hard. And he showed up at the clinic? I nodded slowly. He found me. He wanted to talk. He wanted money. He wanted forgiveness. I don't know what he wanted. Only that he was desperate. I closed my eyes. I begged him to leave you alone. I told him you didn't know the truth. I told him it would destroy you. Emily's voice trembled. But Clara saw him argue with someone. She didn't know who he was at the time. But when she saw him again on social media years later, she recognized him. Robert let out a shaky breath. And she put the pieces together. Daniel looked sick. So my uncle loosened my brake line and my biological father was there too? Emily nodded. Clara said she didn't know if they spoke to each other. But she said his behavior was volatile, erratic, like he was hiding something too. Daniel pressed both hands to his face. "This is insane," he whispered. "All of this, it's unreal." I leaned forward, reaching for him, my voice soft but steady. Daniel listened to me. He looked up, eyes wet. "You are the son of the man who raised you. He chose you, loved you, protected you. Blood means nothing compared to that." Daniel's lower lip trembled. "But you should have told me." I nodded painfully. "You're right. I should have." For the first time that night, he began to cry, not from anger, not from shock, but from the grief of a world suddenly rearranged. I opened my arms, and he hesitated only a moment before sinking into them, trembling like he had as a child after a nightmare. As I held him, I whispered the truth I had never dared speak aloud. I thought burying the past would keep us safe. A tear slipped down my cheek. But the past doesn't stay buried. It always returns, especially the parts we fear the most. "Behind us," Emily whispered. "And the second letter says he's coming back." Daniel pulled away from me slowly, wiping his eyes with the back of his sleeve, his breath uneven. The room felt different now, heavier, darker, as if every secret whispered that night had thickened the air. Emily stood stiffly near the wall, arms wrapped around herself, like she was holding her ribs together. Robert avoided everyone's eyes, pacing nervously near the doorway, muttering curses under his breath. But no one spoke the words we were all thinking. "He's coming back." Daniel turned to Emily, voice shaking. "What does that mean? Who told Clara that? How does she know?" Emily swallowed hard, her throat tight.
She said she saw him again.
"Recently." Her voice cracked. "She said he tried to contact her after the accident. And she said the second letter explains why." I felt my knees weaken. "She saw him?" Emily nodded. "She said he looked different. Older. Unstable. But determined." She glanced toward the front door, fear flickering in her eyes. "She said he's been asking questions. About you. About Daniel." Robert stopped pacing, his eyes wide. "If he's looking for Danny," he shook his head. "We need to call someone. We need to." Daniel cut him off. "Robert, stop." He ran a hand through his hair. "If he wanted to hurt me, why wait all these years?" His voice dropped. "Why show up now?" Emily's voice trembled. "Because Clara said he regrets walking away. She said he feels like he was cheated out of something that belonged to him." Her eyes met mine, full of dread. Clara wasn't sure what he meant by that, but she said his eyes were wrong.
Angry.
Possessive. My stomach twisted. I knew that look. I had seen it years ago, the kind of anger that doesn't burn out, only buries itself until something pulls it back to the surface. Daniel exhaled shakily. "So, Clara saw him recently, and she thinks he's coming here?" Emily nodded, tears welling again. "She said he wants answers. And he wants to see you." Daniel shook his head, disbelief clouding his face.
"Why?"
"After all this time?" His voice lowered. "What does he want from me?" Emily hesitated, her fingers trembling as she touched the folded paper again. "Clara didn't say exactly. Just that he said something strange." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He said Daniel has something he needs." Robert swore under his breath, pacing again. "This is bad. That man, he's unpredictable. Dangerous." He turned to me. "Why didn't you tell me he was back? That he contacted you?" I steadied myself with my cane, my voice trembling. "Because I didn't think he would come near Daniel. I told him to leave us alone. I begged him." I blinked rapidly, trying to steady my breath. "And I thought he listened." Daniel stared at me for a long moment, hurt, fear, and confusion swirling in his eyes, but finally said nothing. He simply looked toward the window, the falling snow illuminated by the warm glow of the porch light. Emily whispered, "Clara said the second letter explains everything. She said the first letter was just a warning." Her voice cracked. "But the second one is the truth." A soft knock came from upstairs. We all froze. A second knock. Slow. Deliberate. From the hallway outside Lily's room. Robert stiffened. "Someone else is here." Daniel moved instinctively toward the stairs, but I reached out, grabbing his arm. Daniel, wait. Another sound, soft footsteps on the landing. Emily pressed her hand against her mouth, eyes wide with terror. Daniel whispered, Lily. Before he could take another step, a voice drifted softly from the dark hallway above. A man's voice. Low, ragged, and heartbreakingly familiar. Daniel, we need to talk. My blood ran cold. He was already inside the house. Daniel froze mid-step, every muscle in his body going rigid. The voice drifting from the upstairs hallway was low, tired, and cracked at the edges, yet unmistakably deliberate. Emily clung to the staircase railing, her breath coming out in small, broken gasps. Robert backed away from the stairs entirely, shaking his head like he was seeing a ghost crawl out of the past. But I felt my heart stop. That voice didn't belong in my son's home. It didn't belong anywhere near him. It belonged to a man who should have stayed gone. Daniel swallowed hard. Who's there? He called, but his voice betrayed him. It trembled, uncertain, full of dread. The footsteps on the landing creaked softly, one slow step at a time. The house itself seemed to inhale in fear, every board settling in tense silence. Then we saw him. He stepped into the faint glow of the hallway light, older, thinner, hair peppered with gray, but those eyes, those same storm-filled eyes I remembered from decades ago. Eyes that once carried charm, then anger, and now something colder, desperation. Daniel stared at him, stunned. Who are you? The man's expression softened, almost tender. You don't recognize me, he said quietly. But I recognize you. His voice cracked. Every part of you. Emily let out a choked sob. Robert swore softly under his breath, and I felt my hands tremble around my cane. Daniel shook his head, confused. Sir, you shouldn't be in my house. The man stepped one stair lower, still keeping a cautious distance. I'm not here to hurt anyone, he whispered. I needed to see you. Daniel's breathing grew uneven. Why? He demanded. Why come here? Why now? The man swallowed hard. Because Clara told me the truth was coming out. His eyes flicked to Emily, then down to the paper clutched in her shaking hand. I knew my name would be on that second letter. He paused, voice trembling. And I couldn't let you learn it from ink on a page. Emily shook her head vigorously, tears streaming. Daniel, don't go near him. He ignored her. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the man standing on his staircase, like a ghost returned to settle unfinished scores. Tell me who you are, Daniel whispered. The man took a deep, fragile breath. My name is Anthony Reynolds. His gaze softened painfully. And I'm your biological father. Daniel staggered back, his hand gripping the railing for support. Emily covered her mouth. Robert closed his eyes in agony.
And
I felt tears spill down my cheeks. The man continued, his voice raw. I never wanted to stay away. But your mother, he looked at me. She made it clear you had a better life without me. And she was right. He paused. But after what happened, after your accident, I couldn't stay away anymore. Daniel shook his head in disbelief. My accident? What do you have to do with that? Anthony exhaled shakily. Everything. Silence crushed the room. I came to the clinic that night, he said softly. I argued with your uncle. I begged him not to involve you in the deal he'd gotten tangled in. Robert stiffened, eyes widening. And when I saw your car, Anthony continued, voice trembling, I panicked. I thought if you signed that contract, you'd end up in the same danger I was in. So Daniel's voice rose sharply. You tampered with my car too? No. Anthony shouted, then lowered his voice, trembling. I checked your car. I saw what your uncle did. And I tightened the line again. Every head snapped toward Robert. Anthony's voice shook. I tried to undo it. I tried to fix it. His breath hitched. But I didn't get to finish. Daniel's world shattered in front of him. Why didn't you tell me? He whispered. Anthony's eyes filled. Because I thought after the accident that I'd killed you. That my arrival had caused everything. I couldn't bear it. His voice broke. I ran. Emily whispered, Clara saw him leave. Anthony nodded. She did. And she confronted me years later. But I begged her to stay silent. He looked at Daniel with unbearable sorrow. But she was right. You deserve to know. Daniel stood there, shaking, tears in his eyes. So, my uncle loosened my brakes, you tried to fix them, and Clara wrote everything down? Anthony nodded slowly. And the second letter? Daniel whispered. Anthony looked at me first, then at Daniel, and his voice fell to a trembling whisper. It explains why I came back now. A pause. And what danger is coming for you next? Daniel stood frozen at the foot of the stairs, staring at the man who had just torn open the foundation of his life. Emily trembled behind him, gripping the banister with white knuckles. Robert sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands.
And
I felt the truth settle over the room like a blanket of cold ash. Anthony stepped down one more stair, slowly, as though afraid to break something fragile. His hands shook at his sides. Daniel, he murmured, I didn't come here to destroy your life. I came because Clara warned me I didn't have much time.
Daniel swallowed, voice tight.
Time for what? Anthony's jaw clenched. To protect you. Robert scoffed, bitter and broken. Protect him? You abandoned him his entire life. Anthony didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on Daniel. I stayed away because I believed it was safer. Because I was mixed with people who expected me to deliver something valuable. He hesitated, searching for the right words. And they think you have it now. Daniel frowned. What? I don't have anything from you. Anthony shook his head slowly. Not an object, Daniel. Information. His eyes darkened. Information I hid at the clinic the night before your accident. Information they think I gave to you. Emily gasped. Clara said there were files missing after that night. Sealed documents. Robert's head snapped up, realization dawning in horror. Is that why they wanted Danny to sign that contract? Because they thought he knew something? Anthony nodded. Those men believed I passed the documents to my son. They thought he'd be an easy target. His voice cracked. But Danny, I never gave you anything. I hid the files in a place they'd never look. Where? Daniel demanded. Anthony's face twisted in pain. In Clara's office. He swallowed. And she kept them hidden all these years. She protected you more than you'll ever know. Emily covered her mouth. The second letter, Anthony nodded, is her confession. She knew they were coming back. She knew they discovered she'd lied about destroying the documents. So she sent the letter, to warn you, to warn us. A cold wave rushed down my spine. Are you saying these men are still looking for Daniel? Anthony inhaled shakily. Not just looking. Coming. He stepped off the final stair.
I saw them again last week. They asked about him.
About you. He looked at my son with trembling eyes. They think you have the documents. And they won't stop until they're sure. Daniel looked sick. So the accident, the letters, you showing up tonight, all of this was never about the past, Anthony whispered. It was about what's coming. Silence flooded the room.
Heavy.
Devastating. Then Emily whispered, voice broken. What do we do? Anthony's expression softened with something like regret and love he'd never learned to show properly. You stay together. You don't answer the door for strangers. You don't travel alone. And when Clara's second letter arrives, he swallowed hard. You read it, because it tells you exactly who they are and what they want. Daniel shook, his breath shallow. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why come now? Anthony's eyes glistened. Because Clara died 2 days ago. The room collapsed into silence. She mailed the second letter the night before she passed, he whispered. She said it was the last thing she could do to protect you. He wiped his eyes. And when I found out, I knew I had to come. Emily broke into tears. Robert let out a shuddering breath. Daniel stepped back, overwhelmed. And I placed a trembling hand on my son's arm. Daniel, I whispered, whatever comes, you will not face it alone. He turned to me, fearful, heartbroken, but no longer a lost boy. Mom, what do I do now? I squeezed his hand gently. You do the same thing I did all those years ago, I said softly. You protect the people you love, even when the truth hurts, even when it frightens you. Anthony took a hesitant step closer. And you let me help this time. Daniel looked at him, really looked, and something shifted in his eyes. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, but the beginning of understanding. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, rattling the glass as if the night itself were warning us the story wasn't over. Because it wasn't. The first letter had exposed the past. The second would reveal the danger. And together, they were the message Emily tried to burn, but that still came back. Some truths cannot be destroyed. Some secrets refuse to stay buried. And some messages return to haunt us because they were meant to save us.